Happy
March.
Yeah, and we believe spring is coming.
Absolutely. We've got lots to talk about today. If you're new here, feel free to type some questions in the live chat and we'll answer. And if you have to go or there's any transmission problem, like streaming quality issue on your end, we always upload this video, the recording, to YouTube later.
Yeah, it's nice when we put it on YouTube because it's slightly better quality than Facebook has.
And also Facebook has started removing videos after 30 days. So if you're looking for a previous recording of Quilts First, YouTube is always the place to look.
It is.
So we're waiting to see who's joined us. We're gonna we have some ambassador questions, and we have an exhibition to tell you about, and lots of things to go over.
Also, just a continuation. Last month we had so many questions that you had asked, and we didn't have time to get to all the answers.
Right. So we're
going to continue that.
Absolutely. So the first thing to talk about is that we have an exhibition. Oh, hello, Roseanne from Canada. We have an exhibition for those of you who are in the Chicagoland area. The Concordia University in River Forest, Illinois, approached us about hosting an exhibition of our work and a gallery talk and reception. And we're going to put those graphics on our social media page soon, but I wanted to give you all a
little heads up.
Yeah, heads up, because if you might want to go with some friends. It's at the Ferguson Art Gallery, located in Kretzmann Hall at Concordia University, 7400 Augusta Street in River Forest. The gallery hours are 9 to 7, Monday through Friday, on the weekends from 10 to 6. There will be a reception on April 12th from 1 to 3, and we'll be giving an artist talk at 2 p.m.
But the show itself
and we'll share all these details later.
The show opens in the middle of this month, so it's mid-March to the beginning of May, and it's a fun opportunity because we've done huge shows all over the world, but we don't get much chance to do anything locally.
Well, exactly.
So it's nice to be just a mile away and have a chance to just have some of our work up.
Yeah, and
share
how many quilts are there going to be?
There'll be 15.
15
So it'll be
quilts from
current and previous.
Yes, exactly. So it's kind of fun to be able to, and we'll be able to, at the artist talk, to be able to talk about the approaches to quilting, the approaches to fabric selection, all of that. So it'll be fun.
I'm also glad it's a university art gallery, which has kind of as its mission, it's a teaching gallery. So it's really nice as the art students there all go through the space all the time, and the majority of their students studying art are going on into art education. So it's really nice to kind of represent fiber and textile arts.
Exactly. So if you're in the Chicago area, anytime between...
I just see Pam Weiss from River Forest. She's right there. So Pam, it's easy for you.
So the exhibition will be from March 16th to May 1st. So you'll have lots of time to get there. But if you're traveling to the Chicago area, sometime between March 16th and May 1st, you will be able to see the Modern Quilt Studio exhibition at Concordia University's Ferguson Art Gallery. So
great.
Super fun.
It'll be fun.
Okay. And if you're just joining us, if you have ambassador questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll keep an eye out for that. But I have some other questions that have come up either in emails or in messages on social media that I'm going to answer. So I'm going to cluster a bunch of them because they're very similar. There's two topics that come up a lot. And the first one is, do you have XYZ? related, when will you be able to restock XYZ? Can you make a custom kit for me? I bought a kit 10 years ago, made a mistake and need more fabric. Do you have more of this fabric? The answer to all of those questions is, if it's on our website, we have it. If it's not on our website, we don't have it. If it's not on our website, we don't want to tell you when it's going to be available, because as soon as it's on our doorstep, we can put it in inventory. But we don't want to tell you, it's just not that predictable. It's post-COVID, supply chains, delivery, everything has changed, and it's just not the case. Like, what was it, the vanilla or something? It's backordered until April something. You know, we can't tell you.
And sometimes other things happen. Like, we had a fabric that was back ordered for 3 months, and it showed up in our last delivery, and it wasn't supposed to be here for a month. So every now and then something gets here early, but a lot of things get arrive late. So if it's on our website, we have it. Otherwise, patience.
Otherwise, we don't know.
Yes.
When we're getting it.
Unless it's something, if it's an old fabric, then it's 99.9% chance we don't have it. It's out of stock, out of print.
But even things like kits that we might have the fabric of, I can't tell you when we're going to be able to restock it, because it depends on how many emails I have to answer that day, how many orders I have to pack up. I mean,
I think everyone appreciates that. There are only so many hours.
Yeah, there's only so many hours. So any of those questions about availability of fabric, please check on our website, because that's what I'm going to have to go look at our website. So, and then sort of a correlated set of topics, emails about, can you choose fabric for my project for me? Like, can we choose fabric for somebody else's project? Can you help me to resize a pattern? Can you help me to figure out a problem I'm having with a quilt? Can you recommend a pattern for X number of fat quarters, charm squares, whatever? The other page, where's the other page of this? Oh, okay. So that's also where there aren't enough hours in the day, I'm afraid, to help people pick out fabrics or provide individual help through email. So that's...
I can go get the other. I'll find the other page. Well, a page of questions is missing.
Do you know what?
I don't know.
Well, let's see.
I'll be right back.
All right. It's in the Google Doc.
Okay.
On the second page. So I'll just skip to the next set. So that's kind of like all of that is. I wish we could accommodate you, but I can't, I'm afraid, and Bill definitely can't, because he's teaching full time too. But okay, so next is multicolor prints with white backgrounds. There were questions about how do you use multicolor prints with white backgrounds, and the quick answer to that is you use it with a solid, so you don't have the print running off into another unit or another block or background or something. So if you're using a large scale print, like with big motifs that has a white background, you look at the scale of the motif and choose a pattern that has patterned pieces that are going to be big enough to actually see that fabric. Because the worst thing to do is to cut up a fabric that has a large motif into little teeny tiny pieces, because you're losing kind of the feeling of the fabric. But on top of that, it just looks a little too chopped up.
Yeah,
usually.
large scale fabrics need large scale pieces.
Right. Okay, and then let's see. So I dealt with that one. Okay, there was a question about cutting small pieces of fabric and what's your advice for cutting small pieces of fabric?
I actually think that's a really interesting one.
You go.
No, you go first, and then I'll jump in.
So, I don't know how to put this. I'm a left-handed 5 foot tall person, and the world is not set up for me. I don't have any workspaces that work for my height and my left-handedness. So I really have to make sure that my body positioning when I'm cutting is as ergonomic as it can be. And a lot of that is, and sometimes if I'm cutting a lot, I'll just get like a stool or something, to stand on that gets me a couple inches higher. Because I think the first thing you want to do is look at your body positioning, that you don't want to be cutting, I'll do it this way. You don't want to be cutting away from you. You want to be having angled your body so you can use the momentum of your arm and shoulder to cut, because you have a lot more control when your weight is closer, is above the blade rather than when it's away from the blade.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, that you're kind of cutting with your whole body and not just with your arm when possible. Now, everyone has different physical limitations with which you have to work, but I definitely think our studio, as Week said, is set up. We have a height difference. No, actually, it's the cutting table is too low for me and too high for you.
Yeah.
So and our gamble, actually, our long arm is set up so it's not ideal for either. It's a little low for me and a little high for you.
Yeah.
So we split the difference. But I think regardless, that whole idea of rotating almost from your hips when you stand.
Like bending over.
And it's
you're moving your upper body over the blade rather than away, your hand away.
And the same thing happens if in drawing, you to get nice curves, you're often drawing with your whole arc from the shoulder or the elbow and not just little movements. But I think it's similar with rotary cutting.
You're going to have more control if your body is the weight is closer to the rotary cutter than
that's a good way to visualize it.
So the other thing too is we have our trimming rulers that have a no slip surface treatment on the back. Whether it's ours or somebody else's, if you're going to cut small pieces, you really want mostly for safety, you're going to want to have some kind of ruler or template that has, it grips the fabric really well. I find that using a smaller ruler helps me cut smaller pieces more easily. That just kind of manipulating this big ruler is a little more awkward. So, we have 3 rulers. We have our everyday ruler, we have this trimming ruler, and then we have our square up ruler. Those are the only rulers we use, period.
And I actually want to mention, whether you are using our non-slip ruler or someone else's, the non-slip surface over time picks up very fine lint and loses a bit of its grip. So I'd say once every month or two, I run it under warm water. Whatever you do, don't use a scouring pad because that'll take off the surface. But I just take very warm water, maybe a little soap on my hand, wash it off and air dry it. And I'm always amazed. Every time I do it, I feel an immediate difference. And I can never actually see.
Yeah, you can't see it.
I can't see it, but if I'm doing a lot of cutting, I feel the slipping begin to happen, and that'll revitalize it pretty nicely.
The other thing too for me, and this is kind of depends, but on your hand size, but I have small hands, is I find it easier to use a smaller, if it's really teeny tiny pieces, using a smaller radius rotary cutter I find easier than a larger one. The one in particular that I find really hard with small pieces is the claspy one that you squeeze. That because you're squeezing, to me it's just a little too awkward. whereas the smaller rotary cutter, do you remember how, is it
45.
The 45?
Oh, the little
the
guy.
little,
This,
the little one.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
30.
The little tiny
18.
That I find a little bit easier to control, because a lot of what you're trying to do is you're trying to control the ruler, and you're trying to control the fabric, and you're trying to control the cutter. And so anything you can do to make it smaller and more manageable and keep it closer to you, the more manageable it's going to be.
And again, I think control is the key. So you figure out what works, left-handed, right-handed, small cutter.
Or
For me,
scissors.
I find a small cutter extremely awkward, and I don't.
It's because you have big hands.
No, it's not. I just don't like it doesn't roll as smoothly to me.
Well,
so I like
but
the bigger one. So
you don't want it to roll as smoothly because you're trying to cut a small thing.
I do.
Yeah, see,
so,
this is-
but what I'm trying to say is there's not necessarily a right or wrong. There's what works for you. And
Exactly.
different things work for each
But
of us.
I think somebody with a smaller hand finds a smaller rotary cutter easier to control for short periods of time.
Yeah, but I will agree with you that a lot of the rotary cutters that are designed to have auto closure or have certain grips, I also find sometimes they're visually in the way of the cut.
Yeah.
And with small cuts, that can get hard. So
They're just bulky.
I think
In worst case scenario, you can always just trace it with a pencil or something like that, and cut it with scissors. If it's like when we were making the little pieces for the flags for the ambassador flag pieces, I used the little rotary cutter for those little tiny pieces because it was just a lot easier. So that's the tip for small pieces. Oh, then the other thing too is there's always the issue, if you're cutting out a corner, that you don't want to overshoot it because then you cut into the fabric.
Yes.
After that, I tend to go a little shy, and then I have some little tiny Kai scissors that I just snip that corner with, because I don't want to have. How many hundreds of times have we cut something and not seen that little
that we've
cut,
gone past,
and then we got to rip it out?
Yeah,
so,
it's very annoying. So that's a real challenge with rotary cutters for sure, because you can't see exactly where it ends. You do have to be careful of that. And I think that
are you going to answer the question about the rotary cutter?
Oh, I didn't see
it's
that.
no longer sharpened. You're talking about the blade.
Oh.
That is, how do you know? To me, when you have to put more energy into cutting it. Probably most of the time it's ready. if you can't remember. But what I like to do is, if I'm cutting and it's missing, it's skipping threads, or the cut isn't
if there's
clean,
a tiny nick in the blade, it'll skip a thread, and then you'll know right away.
or if I feel like I just have to push much harder than I remembered pushing.
I think the sound of it for me is also.
Yeah.
I actually hear it when it gets dull, and I think many of us, and I'm guilty of this too, are so aware of how expensive rotary cutter blades are that I tend to push it a little further than I probably should. And I think that's not a good idea because
it's dangerous.
A sharp blade is much safer.
Pam is right. It was 28 millimeters.
Oh, 28.
Yes,
oh,
it's the smaller
thank you,
one.
Pam. I was like 18. I got the 8
it's over
right.
on the tool wall, so we can't get over there.
And again, with rotary cutters, experiment. If you go to a quilting retreat where other people have different cutters, rotary cutters, you might ask if you can experiment, because over the years we've bought different ones, we've been given many different kinds, and personally I just like the original
stick with the little
Alpha.
Yeah.
I haven't found a better one.
Yeah. So I think the feeling that if you get accustomed to this is the amount of effort that I put into it, and if it feels like you're really struggling with the cuts, or the cuts aren't clean, that's the other thing. The cuts should be very clean, and depending on where your rotary cutter has been, if it got nicked or something like that, but we try to. especially because, at times we've had assistants in the studio and Bill has left a super dull blade. He's so guilty of that.
Yeah.
And then I will go over there and I'll see the assistant struggling and I'll look at, the cuts for the kits or whatever. And I'll be like, oh, come on.
I think
the blade.
If we're talking about blades, the one thing to be careful of when you do change your blade, and I wonder if this has happened to any of you, blades always have that light film of oil to keep them from...
This happens all the time to people.
Yeah,
I know
and
exactly what you're going to
you
say.
accidentally put two blades on, so when you cut, you get all those tiny shards in between the blades. And I remember the first time it happened to me, I couldn't figure out what was going on. I thought there was something wrong with the mat, but it does happen often, so always make sure you just have one blade. And I know that Weeks recently posted on social media how when we change blades, we have two blade cases, one that's labeled old and one that's labeled new, so we can keep the old blades in one. The other thing I'd recommend is if you have an old Altoids tin.
A lot of people have mentioned that.
Yeah, that definitely... For me, it's not just about the blades, it's about used pins.
It's about the safety of the garbage workers as well.
Yeah, it's just like a sharps
concern.
container, a medical sharps container.
Okay, so then there was a question, a big question about quilting quilts on a domestic machine. And the comment was that a lot of the quilts that you see being quilted on YouTube or whatever are baby quilts. And this person was asking about, she was referring to the quilts that we make often in our quilt-alongs as lap sizes, which they're not lap sizes, they're napping sizes, because lap size typically is kind of like 40 by 50 is considered a lap size. Most of our quilt-along quilts are kind of 52 by 78, 55 by 78.
Or if they're square, then they're 50 by 50-ish.
Right, but they're bigger than lap quilts. So the napping size, I think, is what she meant to ask about. So the first time, my first quilt ever, and
it was huge.
You're gonna die when I tell you this. I was in Japan. I had this little tiny, did I maybe pay $250 for it? But it was a Japanese machine, so it was still really good. But it was a small machine with a throat that was about this big. And my first quilt ever was a full bed-size quilt. So not a queen, but almost.
Big.
Yeah, very big. And I pieced and quilted it on that machine. And I quilted, I'd say, started quilting in 1987. I didn't have a long arm until 1999. So for 12 years, I quilted everything on, although when I left Japan, I got my Bernina. It was still...
It was a smaller
Bernina.
It was one of the smaller
small low-end
Berninas,
Bernina, bottom of the line Bernina. And so I've spent a lot of time quilting quilts on a domestic machine that's not a high-end domestic machine. So I have a bunch of tips that I'm going to go through and share with you for that. The first thing I wish I had known is I wish I had thought about the repercussions of batting. Because especially those people who want to use a polyester batting, the bulk you're going to be fitting underneath that throat is so much bigger.
It's so cumbersome.
So and there are obviously lots of considerations in terms of the warmth and the care and all that. But if you want to make your quilting on a domestic machine 100 times easier, use a bamboo batting. Like the Bamboo Dream, a quilter's dream, is so much thinner and less bulky.
And it's light,
Yeah.
because even cotton is wonderful, but the bamboo batting that they make, that
Yeah.
blend, is by far I'd say the best balance of weight and loft in terms
It's
of
the
it's
thinnest
movable.
loft.
Yeah,
It's the thinnest loft, and it rolls to more compactly.
yeah.
So all of the bulk, and
Mhm.
this is like when I quilted my first quilt in 1987. All there was high loft polyester batting.
It's a poofy quilt.
So and I was quilting like very densely, like every inch or two. So I was compressing it, but still.
And doing straight line quilting, because that was what was
Yeah.
and straight line quilting is manageable on most machines, but if your batting is really high loft and not very compressible, and you have a small throat area, it's going to be hard even in the straight line.
So the first tip I have, if you're, especially if you want to improve your your quilting on a domestic machine. Would you be getting some water?
I'll get you some water.
Thank you. Is to think about the batting and to see if you can use a low loft batting that drapes and compresses nicely, like the bamboo batting. If you don't want to use bamboo batting, then I would use the Quilter's Dream, and you want to use cotton, I would use the Request loft of the 100% cotton. But as soon as you start getting into anything with any polyester in it, it's going to kind of increase the bulkiness that has to go through the throat by like 50%. I mean, it's just an enormous difference. So the first thing I would do would be to use batting that you can have. It's easier to control. The second thing I would do, thanks. I usually bring a glass of water down. I didn't today. Okay, the second thing, Bill does not use these.
Nope.
I find them invaluable, even for putting binding on. These little finger cots.
Some people use the full gloves, but those are so much faster, I think.
The gloves are too bulky for me, and these are just enough grippiness. Is the bamboo lighter than the wool? 100 times.
Well,
I mean,
it's also thinner.
it's not the weight. It's not the weight. It's just the bamboo the wool probably has a 1/4 inch of loft to it.
Oh, it is more even. Yeah, I mean it's probably 3 times the loft of the bamboo.
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the bamboo, it's the loftiness, not the weight or anything. It's how tall is it, and it just doesn't even compare. The bamboo is kind of like, it's like felt. It's condensed. That's the other thing. Whereas the wool has a loft.
The weight can make a difference too. Like if you're using a really heavy cotton, that can be physically heavy.
Yeah.
But the wool tends to be, in terms of weight, it's light, but the loft is high. So you have the combination of the two. The worst is having thick and heavy.
Yeah. So typically, this is how I bind. And if I'm quilting something, just on the forefinger and the thumb of my left hand, that's all I need in terms of grippiness. I think if I were doing a free motion, I might even put one on my ring finger just to get a little grippiness over there. But this is all I need. But if you like the gloves, use the gloves. Then what you really want to do is plan on starting in the middle of the quilt. And because the question was, how do you keep it from not warping? And this is assuming that you have either used spray adhesive to baste it, or you've basted it by hand, or you've used safety pins. If I were doing it, I would use is this 505? Is that what?
I think that's
No.
the OD.
Oh, ODIT. Yes.
I think it's 505.
Yes.
I always get the numbers
Yes.
mixed up.
It's on our Hello Baby Part 2 video. There's a picture of the can we use, and we spray very lightly, very delicately outside. We put the quilt on a fence, tack it up, super light spray, and then roll the batting down, and so everything is kind of nicely laminated. And then when I was doing the big bed quilt, I used the bicycle clips that you can buy. Either you can find it at like a sewing place. That's just like a little round clip that people use on the cuffs of their pants if they're cycling, and you roll it up and put it on either end, and that is going to hold the part that's underneath, that's going through the throat. That's going to keep it from splaying out while you move it around. You know, the setup is also really important for quilting on a larger quilt on a domestic machine. And what I did when I was doing the full-size bed quilt was I got every small table I could around my sewing area, and then I set up next to, kind of parallel to where the quilt was going to be, I set up my ironing board at the same height as my sewing table.
I think it's a really nice thing. Most ironing boards are really height adjustable, so you can get it almost flush and extend any table's area with it.
So the thing that you want to be thinking about when you're going to plan on quilting on a domestic machine, a bigger quilt, is you're going to want to think about the weight, and because the weight pulling away from, gravity is not your friend when you're handling a big quilt like this. So you want support for it. I know I've seen pictures of people who have these gizmos, on their ceiling that have clips, and there's like pulley systems.
Really?
And it holds up the corners of the quilt so the weight isn't dragging.
I've never seen that.
But that's a lot of investment in like pulleys in your ceiling and stuff. But I'm just talking about like you're sitting there in your sewing room, your dining room, or whatever.
But the idea of extending your table, that's helpful even if you're sending your quilt out to be quilted. But if you're binding it at home, distributing the weight for binding also makes a real difference. So that ironing board's a good trick.
And if you live near an IKEA, you can get some of those large, what is the name of those tables? The large tabletops with the screw-on legs, very affordably, and those can knock down. But it's just, you want to have the biggest surface you possibly can to hold the weight. And I've done it both ways, where you roll up both sides of the quilt. So you have these two long tubes, and you put like one over your shoulder, and you're just focusing on the area between the unrolled area. You've got two tubes, and then you're just focusing on the area. A lot of it depends on how you're quilting it. If you're doing a straight stitch and you're moving the quilt a lot, that's a different set of challenges than if you are stippling it and you need to move the quilt up and back a lot, because you gotta practice it on something smaller to figure out the best way to manage the weight. But if you're moving the quilt a lot back and forth, you really want to have something grippy on your fingers, because that becomes
there's a lot of muscle strain otherwise.
It's a lot easier to push it through doing a straight stitch
or
a wavy stitch.
And you may notice Weeks is giving most of the advice here, because I rarely...
You've forgotten.
I rarely quilt on a domestic machine, because I've done so much more on the long arm, and this is like, we do a lot collaboratively, but when things have to get quilted on the domestic machine, I'm usually, Tag, you're it. She's a lot better at it than I am.
So you want the flattest surface possible, supporting the weight, and then figuring out, based on whether, if you're doing a straight or wavy, you got to really have something on the side, on the other side of the sewing machine and on your left, so you're not being pulled back. If you're doing it on, if you're stippling or something and you're just working, or some design that's, you're working on a small area at a time and the quilt isn't moving that much, what you're really going to need to do is work on getting good grippiness on your fingers, because that's going to be the bigger challenge, because the quilt isn't moving that much. And then I would encourage you to, if you're doing it for the first time, I think it's a lot easier to quilt straight lines with a walking foot than to do stippling with free motion, just because it feels more controlled.
Yeah.
So, and then let's say this is your quilt. You have the choice as to whether you want to roll it, depending on how you're going to quilt it. If you're going across this way, it's going to be easier because you don't have as far to go. But then you're going to have more bulk underneath. You've got to roll this side up. If you do it the other way and you decide to do, which is what I did with my full-size quilt, is I did long straight lines this way. I didn't have as much bulk under the throat because I didn't have to roll it up as much. However, I really had to have something big on the other side of the sewing machine, because
otherwise it pulls it down. You have to have basically something supporting it. And I actually, I said before, I feel the same way about binding, that when I'm binding a queen size quilt, I like to have that support, because otherwise, when you're trying to keep your binding nice and flush, if you're machine stitching, if you don't support the quilt, it's going to tend to veer to the left, because that's where all the weight is, and it pulls the quilt, the binding away from the edge. So to have a snug binding, you do want to try to support the far end of the quilt.
It definitely is easier if you have a flat sewing surface, but if I were doing a really big quilt, I might even think about moving it from my sewing table to like our dining room table or something like that, that had 6 feet of, room to get all the way to the other end of the quilt if I were doing it lengthwise.
It may be worth saying, for this part of my project, I'm moving away from my normal sewing space where I only need a small area to piece. I need a larger area to quilt or to bind.
Right. So it's a project to figure out whether the challenge is going to be moving the quilt a lot, or trying to control the way you move the quilt. Because if you're dropping your feed dogs, for example, the control, you need to be very consistent in how you move the quilt, because that's what's determining your stitch length. And so that's where that grippiness becomes super important, that you need to be consistent, or else your stitch length gets too long.
And I think Pam had a nice comment that if you have I'm interpreting your comment.
Absolutely.
But if you have a machine that has needle down capabilities, that will help keep it from pulling away when you need to pause.
Well, but
you can always manually just rotate. But it's so easy for the weight to pull it away from you and get a long kind of skipped stitch, which you really don't want.
Yeah. So you want to support the weight behind you also, because the part that you might have it over your shoulder, but it's helpful to have something behind you to hold it, because then it gets stuck on your shoulder, and it's just, you want to be able to have it supported all the way kind of 180 degrees around you. Then I always start in the middle of the quilt, because even you're rolling this up, and even if you've been really good about basting and that kind of thing, sometimes things slip.
Even if it's a small baby quilt, starting in the middle
Right.
minimizes the potential of things going wrong.
And even if you're doing a wavy stitch or something like that, lengthwise, like here's your baby quilt or your napping quilt, and you're going to start, and this you're going to start down here, and you're going to do the center line first, and you're going to have one side rolled up and the other side either flat, hanging on something, or rolled up with bicycle clips, whatever. It depends on the stitching you're doing. And you're going to do that center line first, and then that's going to stabilize things. Again, this should be basted, so nothing should be moving.
But it moves.
It moves. It's going to move as you, and so one of the reasons to have everything flat is because you're less likely to have tucks if everything is flat. So that's, and if you're less likely to have tucks if you have a thinner batting.
And
can you grab that right there, please?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just looking at the, yeah, so this is
oh, there. Oh.
All right. I just saw over
But this is old before they renamed everything.
But, yeah, can you,
So this is the bamboo, to give you an idea, actually.
Yeah, and here's the wool.
Okay, so let me do this. I'm going to hold these up. Let's see.
But yeah.
Let me see if I can do it side by side. Can you see this or
This
not?
is the bamboo. This is the wool. Yes, you can see that. Huge difference. And you start rolling that, and it really makes a big difference.
And that kind of 1/4 inch, even though it compresses, it's always pushing out, trying to get bigger.
Yeah.
And that bamboo is barely compressible because it starts out compressed.
Yeah, it just is so much less
Yeah.
bulkiness. Okay, so the way to avoid, one of the other questions with this was, how do you avoid distortion? You avoid distortion in the basting, I think, and then in the rolling. So the mantra is as flat as you can. Just keep it as flat as you can. Roll it neatly. I didn't use bicycle clips when I was in Japan working on that first quilt. I had safety pins, and I just safety pinned it as I went. But I was really rolling, unrolling, putting it on the floor neatly, tucking it in to get it as tight as but as flat as I could underneath the floor.
And I would also recommend, if you're working on a large quilt and you have to set it aside for a week, if you have somewhere, if you happen to have a guest room with a bed, that you can roll it out and keep it flat. Because if you keep things rolled, it will distort the batting over time.
Yeah.
So long periods of time, try to store it flat as well,
right,
in between sessions.
But I think in general, anytime, and we're kind of like, and I know you've had this too, when you've gone to workshops and you see people throwing around fabric, throwing around pieces. I know, because it's like everything flat all the time, because things warp, things get distorted. You spend all that time cutting it. And I see people just like they'll cut something and they'll just throw it in a pile. And it's just like, if you can just keep things flat all the time,
and
it's going to warp less.
It's always, like, work styles are always tricky, because with a group as large as you all are right now, there are going to be the people who are the messy quilters, the people who are the super tidy quilters. It's like if you watch the Great British Baking Show, you're going to see the
chocolate all over the
floor. Who's
floor.
covered with flour and chocolate and who has the pristine worktop. And ultimately, I do believe that everyone has to find their own groove. However, I think one of the most important things that was kind of communicated to me early on as a designer was to treat every step of what you're doing with kind of the respect and the care that you want with the finished piece, because you're kind of sometimes telling yourself a story about, oh, it doesn't matter. And if you're kind of loose and, I'm going to say, messy, I think a little tidiness tends to lead to more care and precision. You may totally disagree.
I think that
I
can
think
be
it's very-
interpreted as a little judgy.
Oh no, I'm not.
I know. And
No,
the thing is,
I
I
don't
work
find it-
neatly as well. However, I'm thinking about the person who doesn't, by nature, work neatly.
Right.
And to me, the reason to be a little more careful, I think is the way to put it. Not neat,
Right,
just
I did-
careful, is that the process is easier. It when things go together and they fit nicely, it's more fun and it's less of a struggle.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not.
I think you're gonna
Yeah.
get to your desired result more easily too.
It
Yeah, because
just takes
I
less effort.
definitely, you know, if I'm eating someone's baked goods, I don't care how they got there.
Yeah,
But I do know that, and I think also we work in a collaborative space, so there also has to be respect for the other person's space.
But also, it's just things. I don't lose things. Everything is just a little bit goes together a little bit more easily.
It does.
If you just can keep things flat. Okay, so then another question we had was about somebody was, so I think that covers the quilting on the domestic machine. Another question was somebody was saying that they were at QuiltCon and they saw lots of different threads and different size stitches on quilts, and do we use the same thread, and do we quilt with the same stitches, and do we do that sort of thing, and so this is gonna horrify some of you. We piece with remnant bobbins from our long arm because we are for environmental reasons and financial reasons, we just don't like the waste. So we go through so much thread and we have so many bobbins that are left over from quilting quilts that right now, like working on the Ambassador, we've probably used like 4 or 5 different colors of bobbin thread and top thread because you're never going to see it, and we just don't like the waste.
But we don't use we're not going to be using the black thread or the white thread.
No.
We're generally
neutrals,
using a neutral or a medium value at the very least.
Yeah.
And in terms of brands and weight, we've been to so many quilt shows where there are all the vendors. The reality is different machines work differently with different threads. And we have had very good luck with very ordinary signature cotton thread, and we use it for piecing and quilting. And there are a lot of threads that cost 3 to 4 times as much that are sold, and I hear in workshops often that there are people who say like, but that's the one that works in my machine.
Yes.
That's important. You have to figure out what works.
So do use the thread that works in your machine, but we look for the value of the thread and the saturation of the thread color, but if it's a pale blue or it's a pale gray or if it's a pale tan or if it's pale like a sage green and it looks okay with the colors I'm using, I'm not worrying. I'm just kind of using up the old bobbins. And so in terms of the thread color for piecing, that is just the efficiency of whatever we have is what we use, and we sort of make that choice typically about, it's usually a value issue.
Yeah, value more than hue.
Yeah. But on the quilt top, I can say that we don't have many nevers. We never have used, nor will we ever use variegated thread. we don't love that look for our quilts. If you love it, feel free to use it. But sometimes we'll change thread colors depending on the quilt. The thing that we don't do very much is combine hand quilting and machine quilting. We've done that a couple of times for projects we started out with by hand, but they're not anything you'll ever see. And mostly that's just because of time, that hand quilting just takes too much time. I guess the comment I want to make about the big stitch quilting popularity is that your household may be different than ours, but we've had 96 foster animals throughout our house and about 50 kittens. There is no way in my household I could have a big stitch hand done, anything in use. It would have to be on a wall.
And I think for those of you who haven't seen big stitch quilting, it's what a woman who was a garment sewer that we knew called toenail catchers. And they just aren't practical for functional quilts. And I think anything that can snag is kind of a non-starter for me, for sure. And the Weeks is getting some thread. Okay, let's see. She's okay. So the big stitch, yeah, decoratively, I'm fine with it on a wall, but just not as a functional quilt.
So yeah, I think I did a slight, I wouldn't say, it's not a teeny tiny stitch, but it's a bigger stitch for one project, and I felt like it wasn't as durable as I need a quilt to be.
Yeah.
So so this is the thread we use, and we don't have any gig. Nobody's telling us to promote this for you. This is Signature 100% cotton, Tex 40 weight. So this is probably a little bit thicker than many of you use, but it's what we use for quilting, and you can't fit as much on a bobbin because it's thicker than a lot of quilting thread, but we don't care. We just can't deal with the waste.
I actually like the thickness for quilting because there are some people who say, I want to buy the thinner, either the Egyptian cottons or a lighter weight because it disappears more. Because we think about the quilting as a design layer, we actually usually want it to be visible. And if it's too thin, you don't see much color.
And I also find it hard to see.
It's hard to see.
Yeah.
But I'll also say
quilting.
It's easier to thread the needle. But
yes,
this,
true.
And
That's
we
true.
were given, at one point, I can't remember how it happened, but we got an entire set of Signature's lighter weight threads, the 50, and it's sitting unused.
It's fine. It's totally fine. It's just
we don't use it as much.
But we only have the little things.
Yeah, we use it for piecing sometimes, but
exactly.
I wouldn't personally quilt with it.
So then let's see. The next question was about moving quilts around under. Hold on, let's see. So Anne, wait a second. Are we done with any of the fabrics after clue 1? Okay. No, so these are on other questions. Okay.
Oh, we'll get that.
Actually, we can answer those now because otherwise they'll get buried. Okay, so let me just look. So there's a question, because if you're watching on YouTube, you're not going to see the questions. Are we done with any of the fabrics after clue 1? What?
Oh, we're talking about the ambassador quilt. Yes. So we aren't going to after the installment one.
I understand what she's saying. I'm just like, we just started.
Right. We're not going to tell you right now because there are times when, for those of you doing the ambassador quilt along, there are times you may only use that fabric once. There are some that you'll come back to later. But we're right now, don't just keep them handy.
Yeah. We just started.
We just started.
Yes, we just started.
But also, some people may ask because they may be worried there are times when you use a lot of one fabric. We figured out how much you need. So if you've used a lot, don't worry, you're not about to run out.
Yeah. Ann Faulkner says that she's used the big stitch to hand quilt with the wool bat, and those stitches sink into the loft with ever feeling like they would catch. That was my issue. That was exactly my situation, and I have not had good durability with it. Maybe you're using a better thread than I was using. I was using a quilting thread. I was not
using
this. Yeah, I was using the Gutermann quilting thread. But those big stitches don't seem to work in my life.
Yeah, I don't love it. It's just
not durable
but,
enough.
But if I do agree though that with the wool bat, because it does have more loft, they do sink in more. But I think they can be toenail catchers or foster kitten nemesis.
So so I want to answer some more ambassador questions. If we're making the queen size, do we need to repeat the process 3 more times? So you don't know the answer to the question. You had a choice at the beginning to make one flag or multiple flags. You should process. You're making identical versions based on the number of flags you made. So if you made 2 flags, you're repeating that process twice for each flag. If you made 1 flag, you're repeating that same process for all 4.
If you made 4 flags and you're doing 1 each of the 4 flags.
Exactly.
I hope that makes sense.
I hope that is clear. Does anybody else have any, before we move on, any other ambassador quilt-along questions? Add it to the live chat so we can answer that. Somebody asked, what is the quickest quilting design that's not straight lines? So I think a gentle wave, parallel, they don't have to be perfectly parallel, but the kind of arcs of the waves should be similar throughout, and that to me is fast as a straight line, and I would do that with a walking foot and the feed dogs up.
And if you're doing free motion with the feed dogs down, one of the quickest stitches would be, I'll just use may I use the back of this?
Yeah.
Would be what we call a horizontal stipple, and I'll just draw very large here, and then I'll be, whoa, where you're going kind of straight line. Whoa, I can't do this straight line, come back, straight line, go back. So it's basically an interrupted straight line, but when you see that, you're primarily moving in one direction with only little shifts. So you make good use of that throat area,
and you're not moving it too much.
Like with stippling, it's a workout.
Hardest.
I actually think
because
stippling is really hard.
You've got to control so much. If you can use the ergonomics of this to then gently come back, that's going to be, this is like so hard.
And if you think about Weeks' earlier comment about with rotary cutting, having your weight over the rotary cutter, if you're doing quilting like this, you can kind of have your hands down and push and
just
back and forth. Whereas with stippling, it's kind of,
it's this.
It's all movement from kind of your wrists.
But it's a lot to try to control.
Yeah, and if you can do it, great. But in terms of easiest, I think the least strenuous, and especially, for anyone who has any arthritis or any hand mobility issues, what's nice again about that, what we call the horizontal stipple or vertical stipple, if you want to think of it that way, is you can, especially if you have those finger cots or grippy gloves, you can let your body do the work and your hands are mostly guiding and not making small motions. So
exactly.
If you haven't tried that, it's very forgiving.
Yeah.
I think because there's a predominant direction, it's easy to keep track of and be consistent. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, then there was a question about lining up pieced backings. And that would be if you have a seam in the middle of your backing and you're trying to line it up with the seam of the quilt. I'm guessing if that's pieced, you might want to do that. But I would try to avoid having two seams line up.
You always want them staggered.
That's what I'm just saying, yeah. Because you don't want that bulkiness in the center of the quilt. But if you're just talking about lining it up so it doesn't, shift.
Or is it lining to pattern match? I'm not sure what that question was.
Well, lining up pieced backings, I think that means lining it up with the front of the quilt.
Oh, I had taken that as meaning lining up the patterns.
Well, I think they would have said line up the patterns.
Okay, I don't know.
I don't know, but anyway, if you're asking about lining up piece backings to the front of the quilt of where you want it to be, I would just baste it so it can't move, and then just like let everything else go where it needs to go. But if you want,
just start with the seam staggered.
If you want your lining or your backing in a particular place on the back of the finished quilt, I would baste a couple of long stitches. And the easiest way I think to do that is to putting it on a big table, or I like to work on the floor. I know a lot of people don't like to work on the floor, but again, keep everything very flat, and then you're just scooping. I usually start when I'm basting in the middle of the quilt with a huge long thread. I put the needle on one end of the long thread, I go in that direction, and then I remove that needle, and I take the big tail at the other end and go in the other direction. So I would baste something if you really want it to line up in a specific place.
And speaking of basting, if any of you do hand quilting, or you quilt on your domestic machine and hate the basting aspect, some machine, long arm quilters do offer the service of just basting. And what they do is they take your backing, your batting, and your piece top and just do a very simple basting stitch over it all, which is extremely fast. I mean, there's still the setup time, so it's not nearly as expensive as doing the whole quilt, and not everyone offers this service. But if it's something that would help you out, you can ask your quilt shop if anyone knows.
So I have a couple of quick things. Minky on quilt backs. We love Minky on quilt backs. Have your vacuum cleaner right there, and if you happen to have a serger, you can serge the edges before
it's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess, and then you clean it up.
Yeah,
that's just kind of how it goes.
We use Minky on kind of whole cloth throws. We've never put it on the back of a pieced quilt, but you could. We live in Chicago. It's cold in the winter, so
we have put it on. I think you've forgotten. We've given it to people.
Oh, to people. We never for ourselves.
We did it for our daughter. You've forgotten, but that's okay.
I have a terrible memory.
Yeah, that's a terrible memory.
She'll attest to that.
But basically, it's stretchy, so you want to keep it flat. I find it easier to keep it flat. You might want to consider basting or quilting with the Minky side up, in terms of not having it stretch. Although I do find it, unless you're using a contrasting thread, it's harder to see. But there are different.
Yeah.
I love Minky on the back of certain quilts. I wouldn't put it on the back of like a super labor-intensive quilt, but for a snuggling sort of functional.
But also make sure to clean your machine and your bobbin area very thoroughly as you go along.
Okay, then two
time for a couple more.
Colors for hospice quilts. it's really hard to give like blanket recommendations for colors. I think I would probably go along the more desaturated route, meaning not super bright, not super loud, because there is a calm that a lot of people want at the end of life, and certainly the people who were taking care of them and grieving them might want that as well. So I would stick to kind of calmer colors for hospice quilts. And I would probably use prints as opposed to solids, because prints are going to hide stains more easily. And then there was one other question. Jackie asked about Lucky.
Oh.
And is Lucky still
our poodle
around?
Lucky.
Yes, and this is the last thing we'll mention before we go. Lucky is doing great. Lucky passed amazingly. We adopted Lucky last March, and Lucky just she passed her Canine Good Citizen test, and she and I are working to become a therapy dog, for her to become a therapy dog, and she'll be going to schools and healthcare settings, maybe hospices, and even places like they take them to the 911 operator's break room. You know, people that have stressful jobs who would like a little time with a nice dog. So she has
she's upstairs sleeping now.
Yes, she has really transformed from the past year, from being a scared kind of like really frantic dog to being a very nicely behaved, sweet little
It's kind
poodle.
of cool to watch during this Canine Good Citizen test, where you've got a room full of dogs, and Weeks can just say to Lucky, sit, and she can let go of the leash and walk across the room, and Lucky just sits there like a sweet dog and waits for Weeks to call, and then she comes running.
Yeah, and I will share this because I think it's really for anybody. I started this 15 years ago. I didn't grow up with dogs. I didn't have access to dogs. I didn't know anything about dogs. I started fostering dogs. I started taking classes in canine behavior. I started doing training with a previous dog. He was a little too fearful of other dogs, so he was never going to be a therapy dog because he could not be around the other dogs needed. And so then I put the dream on hold for 8 years. And when we were given Lucky to foster, I could see very quickly that she was interested in dog training, and which is one of the reasons I wanted to, we wanted to, foster her or adopt her. And so, what was it, 2 weeks ago, I guess, she passed her Canine Good Citizen test, and it's just like you can start from nothing. And like 15 years, you just kind of do a little every day.
And she's having a great time.
You know a lot about dogs.
Yeah, and she's doing nose work where she sniffs out clove or birch oil, and she just really has fun with
We've
that.
done agility training with her, and so
it's really enjoyable.
Yeah, it's been lovely. So we have a kind of no pets policy on the Modern Quilt Studio Patterns and Fabrics page, because it becomes just a pet page.
That's why they're
she's doing great, and thank you for asking. It's been a very gratifying experience. So now
that's great to read that, Darcy, that you also do pet therapy.
Oh, yay! Yes.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. Yeah. So she's tomorrow night we'll be working on exposing her to wheelchairs and people in crutches and getting her comfortable in those medical settings.
So thank you all for joining us, and I hope we didn't miss and anything in the comment. It's always hard. Sometimes comments go by, but we're enjoying this. For those of you doing the Ambassador Quilt along with us, there's more fun coming up.
Oh, yes. Oh, and the last thing, this is kind of fun, is we just added, Bruno Mars just released a song yesterday? No, Friday, called Cha 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 that we added to the playlist. The timing of the
So
cha-cha.
if you aren't doing the ambassador, the
Yeah,
cha-cha play is one of the units. So,
So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
So prepare for some. You'll be going, if you're doing the ambassador quilt along, you'll be going to Daredevil Island this week.
so hang on.
So buckle up. I'm just saying.
So thank you all.
Yes.
We're going to say good night, and thanks for joining us, and we'll get this up on YouTube as soon as we can. So
Have a good
have a
one.
great
Take care.
March. Bye-bye.